The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the Pinecrest Hotel, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor of the lobby. Outside, the hustle and bustle of downtown traffic continued as usual, but inside, the hotel maintained its atmosphere of quiet luxury. The soft melody of classical music drifted from hidden speakers, mixing with the gentle murmur of conversations and the occasional ring of the bell at the front desk. Elena Cortez adjusted her uniform and tucked a stray strand of dark hair behind her ear. At 37, she had the kind of face that showed both warmth and weariness, the result of raising a child alone while working multiple jobs to make ends meet. For the past 8 years, she had worked as a housekeeper at the Pinecrest, one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than most cleaning positions, and the management was generally understanding of her situation as a single mom. "Elena, we need extra help on the 3rd floor. The guests in 317 checked out late, and the new arrivals will be here in an hour," called Diane, the head of housekeeping, her voice echoing down the service hallway. "I'll head up right away," Elena replied, quickly gathering her supplies. As she loaded her cart with fresh towels and sheets, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart sinking as she read the message. "Everything okay?" Diane asked, noticing Elena's expression. Elena sighed, rubbing her temple where a headache was beginning to form. "Not really. My babysitter just canceled. She's sick with the flu, and today's a teacher development day at school." She stared at her phone, quickly scrolling through her contacts, mentally checking who might be available to watch her daughter on such short notice. "Your daughter, Isabella, right? How old is she now?" Diane asked, leaning against the doorframe. "She just turned 11 last month," Elena said, a hint of pride momentarily replacing her worry. "But she's very mature for her age. She's been taking care of herself more and more lately. I just don't like leaving her home alone for a full 8-hour shift." Diane nodded sympathetically. "Bring her here," she suggested after a moment's thought. "She can stay in the break room. We've got the TV in there, and the Wi-Fi password is posted on the wall. She can do homework or whatever." Elena looked up, surprised by the offer. "Are you sure? Mr. Peterson is pretty strict about staff bringing family members to work." Mr. Peterson was the hotel manager, a stern man in his 50s who ran the Pinecrest with military precision. "Let me handle Peterson," Diane said with a dismissive wave. "It's not like we haven't done this before in emergencies. Besides, it's just for today, right?" Relief washed over Elena. "Yes, just today. Thank you so much, Diane. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Don't mention it. Just make sure she stays in the break room and out of the guests' way. And get that room on the 3rd floor done ASAP," Diane added, already walking away to attend to other matters. Elena quickly called Isabella, instructing her to pack her backpack with books, homework, and anything else she might need for the day. Then she arranged for a rideshare to pick up her daughter from their small apartment on the outskirts of the city. 45 minutes later, Elena met Isabella at the staff entrance, giving her daughter a quick hug. Isabella looked like a younger version of her mother, with the same dark hair and thoughtful brown eyes, though her features still held the softness of childhood. "Remember the rules," Elena said as she led Isabella through the service corridors to the staff break room. "Stay in here unless you need the bathroom. Don't wander around the hotel, don't bother the other staff, and definitely stay away from the guests." "I know, Mom," Isabella replied, trying not to roll her eyes. She had heard these instructions before on the rare occasions when she had to accompany her mother to work. "I brought my math homework and my history book. Plus, I downloaded some episodes of that baking show we like." The break room was small but comfortable, with a worn couch, a few tables and chairs, a microwave, and a refrigerator humming quietly in the corner. A television was mounted on one wall, and a bulletin board covered with staff notices hung on another. "There's some snacks in my locker," Elena said, opening a metal door and pointing to a brown paper bag inside. "And there's a vending machine if you get really hungry, though it's overpriced." She handed Isabella a $5 bill. "Just in case." Isabella settled on the couch, already pulling out her math textbook. "I'll be fine, Mom, don't worry." Elena checked her watch and realized she was running behind. "I've got to go finish that room on the 3rd floor. I'll try to check on you during my break, but it might be a few hours. Call me if you need anything, okay?" "Okay. Love you," Isabella said, already absorbed in her homework. "Love you too," Elena replied, hurrying out the door. The next few hours passed uneventfully for Isabella. She finished her math problems, read 2 chapters of her history book, and watched an episode of The Baking Show on her phone. By mid-afternoon, however, she was growing restless. The break room had no windows, and the fluorescent lighting made her eyes tired. She decided to stretch her legs with a quick trip to the bathroom down the hall. As she walked back to the break room, she heard a commotion coming from somewhere in the hotel. Curiosity got the better of her, and instead of turning right to return to the break room, she turned left, following the sounds of urgent voices and quick footsteps. The service corridor opened onto a side entrance to the main lobby, and Isabella peeked around the corner. The lobby was a massive space with a high ceiling, crystal chandeliers, and plush furniture arranged in elegant groupings. At the center of the current activity was an enormous grand piano, a beautiful instrument with a gleaming black surface that reflected the chandelier light like a mirror. Several staff members were gathered around the piano, and a woman in a sleek business suit was gesturing emphatically, clearly unhappy about something. No, this won't do at all," the woman was saying, her voice carrying across the lobby. "The piano needs to be positioned exactly in front of those windows. The lighting will be critical for the photographs, and the governor will be seated just there for his performance." Isabella's eyes widened. A governor was coming to play the piano? She stepped a little farther into the lobby, fascinated by the scene. "We're doing our best." "Ms. Reynolds," said one of the hotel staff, a young man in a uniform that marked him as part of the maintenance team. "But we're short-staffed today. 2 of our guys called in sick, and this piano weighs over 800 pounds. "The gala starts in 4 hours, the woman, Ms. Reynolds, said, checking her watch. "Everything needs to be perfect. The Pinecrest's reputation is on the line. Not to mention the charity will be expecting the full VIP experience they're paying for." Isabella watched as the maintenance workers struggled to move the piano inch by inch. She had taken piano lessons for the past 3 years at a community center near her school. Though she had never played an instrument as grand as this one, she understood how delicate and valuable it must be. The maintenance team was clearly having trouble. There weren't enough people to distribute the weight properly, and they were at risk of scratching the expensive marble floor, or worse, damaging the piano itself. Without thinking too much about it, Isabella stepped fully into the lobby and approached the group. "Excuse me," she said, her voice coming out quieter than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again. "Excuse me." The woman in the business suit turned, noticing her for the first time. "Yes, can I help you?" Her tone suggested that she doubted very much that she could help Isabella with anything. I noticed you're trying to move the piano," Isabella said, suddenly feeling very small under the woman's scrutiny. "I think you need to put felt pads under the legs first so it slides better and doesn't scratch anything." There was a moment of surprised silence. "And who might you be?" Ms. Reynolds asked, raising an eyebrow. Before Isabella could answer, one of the maintenance workers spoke up. "The kid's right, actually. We usually use special sliders for the grand piano. They should be in the storage room, but with everything going on today—" "I can help," Isabella offered, gaining confidence. "I take piano lessons, and my teacher is really careful about how we move even the small upright pianos. You need at least 4 people for a grand piano this size, 1 for each corner, and you need to move it very slowly." Ms. Reynolds studied Isabella for a moment, then glanced at her watch again. "What's your name, young lady?" "Isabella Cortez. Are you a guest's daughter?" Isabella hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "No, my mom works here. She's a housekeeper. I'm supposed to be in the break room, but I heard the commotion and thought I might be able to help." Instead of sending her away as Isabella expected, Ms. Reynolds nodded briskly. "Rick, go get those piano sliders from storage, and find another person to help if you can." She turned back to Isabella. "If you know about pianos, you can stay and observe. Just don't get in the way." Isabella nodded eagerly, stepping back as the maintenance team reorganized themselves. When Rick returned with the felt sliders, they carefully lifted each corner of the piano just enough to slip the pads underneath. "Now remember, we need to move in perfect unison," instructed the lead maintenance worker. "On my count. 1, 2, 3, push." The piano began to glide more smoothly across the floor, but it was still a struggle with just 3 people. Isabella bit her lip, watching as they strained. "You're going to tip it if you push that way," she said suddenly. "Can I please help?" "I'm stronger than I look." Ms. Reynolds looked skeptical but then nodded. "Fine. Take that corner, but be careful. Isabella positioned herself at the fourth corner of the piano, placed her hands carefully where they would provide leverage without damaging any part of the instrument, and waited for the count. 1, 2, 3, push. To everyone's surprise, the addition of even Isabella's modest strength made a significant difference when properly distributed. The piano moved more easily, sliding gracefully across the marble floor to its designated spot by the windows. Perfect, Ms. Reynolds declared, stepping back to assess the positioning. That's exactly where it needs to be. Thank you all. She even gave Isabella a small nod of approval before turning her attention to a tablet where she was checking off items from a long list. Isabella beamed with pride. She had helped solve a problem, and the fancy event coordinator had actually thanked her. Wait until she told her mom about this. Speaking of which, Isabella suddenly realized how long she'd been gone from the break room. She needed to get back before her mother came to check on her and found her missing. Just as she was about to slip away, a sharp voice cut through the lobby. What on earth is going on here? The sharp voice cut through the calm atmosphere of the lobby like a knife. Isabella turned to see a tall, thin man striding toward them, his face pinched with obvious displeasure. He wore the same uniform as the front desk staff, but with an additional gold pin on his lapel that marked him as someone important. What on earth is going on here? He repeated, his eyes darting from the maintenance workers to Ms. Reynolds and finally landing on Isabella. Why is there a child touching our Steinway grand piano? Do you have any idea how much that instrument costs? Isabella instinctively stepped back, her hands dropping to her sides. The pride she had felt just moments ago vanished, replaced by a sick feeling in her stomach. Ms. Reynolds stepped forward, her professional demeanor never wavering. Mr. Blackwell, everything is under control. We're positioning the piano for tonight's charity gala, as discussed in yesterday's staff meeting. That doesn't explain why a child is handling a $250,000 instrument, Mr. Blackwell said, his voice rising with each word. He pointed a finger directly at Isabella. Who are you? Where are your parents? This is completely unacceptable. Isabella opened her mouth to explain, but no words came out. She had never been yelled at by a stranger before, especially not in such a public place. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she noticed hotel guests pausing to watch the scene unfold. She was actually helping us, one of the maintenance workers said, stepping up beside Isabella. We were short-staffed and she knew exactly how to— I don't care what she knew. Mr. Blackwell snapped. This is a 5-star hotel, not a playground. We have insurance requirements, liability concerns. He turned back to Isabella, who was now fighting back tears. Does your mother know you're wandering around the hotel unsupervised? Who let you in here? Isabella's lip trembled. She wanted to disappear, to run back to the safety of the break room, but her feet felt frozen to the spot. Ms. Reynolds cleared her throat. Richard, perhaps we should discuss this more privately. The young lady was only trying to help, and she did so quite effectively. But Mr. Blackwell wasn't listening. His face had turned an alarming shade of red as he continued his tirade. This is exactly the kind of unprofessional behavior that damages our reputation. First, we have staff bringing their children to work, then allowing them to roam freely around the property, interfering with preparations for our most important event of the season. He threw his hands up in exasperation. What's next? Letting them check in our VIP guests? The entire lobby had gone silent. The soft background music seemed to fade away as everyone, from the bellhops to the guests, waiting at the front desk and watched the uncomfortable scene playing out before them. A woman in a business suit who had been checking in slowly put down her credit card. An elderly couple seated in the lounge area exchanged glances. Even the barista at the small coffee counter in the corner had stopped making drinks to stare. Isabella wished the marble floor would open up and swallow her whole. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, determined not to cry in front of everyone. I'm sorry, she managed to whisper. I was just trying to help. Sorry doesn't cut it, Mr. Blackwell said coldly. This is a serious breach of protocol. I'll need to speak with your parents immediately, and then with Mr. Peterson about how this was allowed to happen in the first place. Just then, a new voice joined the conversation, a voice that Isabella recognized instantly and that filled her with both relief and dread. I'm her mother. Elena Cortez stood at the edge of the lobby, still in her housekeeping uniform, her face a mixture of confusion and concern. She must have gone to check on Isabella in the break room, found her missing, and followed the commotion to the lobby. "Mom," Isabella said, her voice small and shaky. Elena walked quickly to her daughter's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "What's happening here?" she asked, looking from Isabella to Mr. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell's expression shifted slightly as he realized he was now addressing a staff member, but his tone remained harsh. Ms. Cortez," Elena supplied, standing straighter. "Ms. Cortez," he continued with a slight sneer. "Are you aware that your daughter was handling expensive hotel property without authorization? That she was wandering the public areas unattended? This is completely against hotel policy." Elena's grip on Isabella's shoulder tightened slightly. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "I understand your concern, Mr. Blackwell. Isabella was supposed to remain in the break room today. I had childcare issues and received permission from Diane in housekeeping to bring her in. I apologize if she was somewhere she shouldn't have been." She looked down at her daughter. "Isabella, what happened? Why did you leave the break room?" Before Isabella could answer, one of the maintenance workers spoke up again. "If I may, Ms. Cortez, your daughter was actually very helpful. We were short-staffed and struggling to move the piano safely for tonight's event. She showed us the proper technique to avoid damaging the instrument. She was quite knowledgeable." Ms. Reynolds nodded in agreement. "That's correct. The young lady was remarkably helpful, and she was under my supervision the entire time." This wasn't entirely true, but Isabella was grateful for the woman's support. Elena looked surprised, then gave her daughter a small, proud smile before turning back to Mr. Blackwell. "It seems Isabella was trying to be helpful, though I agree she should have stayed where I told her to. We will both be more careful in the future." Mr. Blackwell wasn't satisfied. "That's beside the point. Children of staff members are not permitted in guest areas under any circumstances. This is clearly stated in the employee handbook, which I'm sure you signed when you were hired." He straightened his jacket with a sharp tug. "I will need to report this incident to Mr. Peterson. There may be disciplinary consequences." At the mention of possible punishment, Elena's expression changed. Isabella could see the worry in her mother's eyes. They both knew how much Elena needed this job. "Please," Elena said quietly. "I'm a single mother. I had an emergency today with childcare. It won't happen again." "Rules are rules, Ms. Cortez," Mr. Blackwell said coldly. "Perhaps you should have considered your employment obligations before—" "Before what, Richard?" A new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see an older man with silver hair and a well-tailored suit approaching from the direction of the administrative offices. Despite his age, probably in his 60s, he carried himself with an energy that commanded attention. The small crowd that had gathered in the lobby parted to let him through. "Mr. Peterson," Mr. Blackwell said, his tone immediately becoming more respectful. "I was just explaining to Ms. Cortez that bringing children to work is against hotel policy, especially when they're allowed to handle valuable equipment like our Steinway. Mr. Peterson, who Isabella now realized must be the hotel manager that her mother often mentioned, surveyed the scene with calm, appraising eyes. "I see. And what exactly was happening with the piano?" Ms. Reynolds stepped forward. "We were positioning it for the governor's performance tonight, sir. We were short-staffed in maintenance, and this young lady actually provided some valuable assistance. She knew the proper techniques for moving a grand piano without causing damage." Mr. Peterson raised an eyebrow, looking at Isabella with new interest. "Is that so? And how would you know about moving pianos, young lady?" Isabella swallowed nervously but found her voice. "I take piano lessons at the community center, sir. My teacher is really strict about how we treat the instruments. She taught us that even small uprights need special care when moving them. And grand pianos are much more delicate because of how the strings and hammers are arranged." She paused, then added quietly, "I just wanted to help." Mr. Peterson said, stroking his chin thoughtfully. He turned to Elena. "Miss Cortez, isn't it? You work in housekeeping?" "Yes, sir," Elena replied, standing a little straighter. "For 8 years now." "8 years," he repeated, nodding slowly. "Diane has always spoken highly of your work." He glanced back at Isabella. "Your daughter seems to have inherited your attention to detail." Elena smiled slightly. "Thank you, sir." Mr. Peterson turned to Mr. Blackwell, whose face had lost some of its angry color. "Richard, I believe we can handle this without making a federal case out of it." The child was trying to be helpful, and according to Ms. Reynolds, she actually was helpful. He checked his watch. We have more pressing matters to attend to before tonight's gala, don't you think? Mr. Blackwell looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. Yes, sir, he said stiffly. Good, Mr. Peterson said with a nod. Ms. Reynolds, how are we coming with the rest of the preparations? As the conversation turned to details about the evening's event, Isabella felt her mother gently pulling her away from the group. They walked in silence toward the service corridor, Elena's hand still firm on her shoulder. Once they were out of earshot, Elena stopped and turned to face her daughter. Isabella braced herself for a scolding, but instead, her mother knelt down so they were eye to eye. Are you okay? Elena asked, her voice gentle as she brushed a strand of hair from Isabella's forehead. Isabella nodded, though her eyes were still watery. I'm sorry, Mom, I know I was supposed to stay in the break room. I just went to the bathroom and then heard people talking about the piano and... She trailed off, looking down at her shoes. And you wanted to help? Elena finished for her, sighing softly. Are you mad? Elena was quiet for a moment. I'm not mad, but I was worried when I couldn't find you. And I'm disappointed that you didn't follow the rules we agreed on. She cupped Isabella's cheek. But I'm also proud of you for knowing something valuable and for wanting to help others. That's a good quality to have. Isabella looked up, surprised. You're proud? Even though that man yelled at me and might get you in trouble? Mr. Blackwell is... Elena seemed to search for the right words. He's very focused on rules. Sometimes too focused, but Mr. Peterson seemed to understand the situation. She stood up straight again. Now I need to get back to work and you need to go back to the break room and stay there until my shift ends. No more adventures today, okay? Okay, Isabella agreed quickly. I promise. As they walked back toward the break room, Isabella couldn't help but ask, Mom, do you think Mr. Peterson was right? Do I have your attention to detail? Elena smiled, giving her daughter's shoulder a gentle squeeze. That and more, mija. That and more. What neither of them knew was that this incident was far from over. In fact, it was just the beginning of a series of events that would change both their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. Back in the break room, Isabella sat quietly, trying to focus on her history textbook. But the words on the page kept blurring as her mind replayed the humiliating scene in the lobby. The way Mr. Blackwell had yelled at her in front of everyone. The pitying looks from the hotel guests. The worry in her mother's eyes when she mentioned possible disciplinary action. Isabella closed her book with a sigh. She had only wanted to help. How had things gone so wrong? The door to the break room opened and Isabella looked up, expecting to see her mother. Instead, Diane from housekeeping entered carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. Thought you might like something sweet, she said, handing one of the cups to Isabella. Your mom told me what happened. Am I in trouble? Isabella asked, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Diane sat down on the couch beside her. No, honey. From what I hear, you were actually quite helpful with that piano. She took a sip of her hot chocolate. But you did break a rule by leaving the break room, and rules are important in a place like this. Isabella nodded solemnly. I know I won't do it again. Good girl. Diane patted her knee. Your mom should be finished in about an hour, and then you 2 can head home. She stood up and headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Isabella? Don't worry too much about Mr. Blackwell. He treats everyone that way. After Diane left, Isabella tried again to concentrate on her homework, but her thoughts kept drifting. She wondered about the charity gala that was happening that evening. The governor was going to play the piano. Her piano teacher would be so impressed if she knew Isabella had helped position a piano for a governor. But then again, her teacher might also be disappointed that Isabella had gotten into trouble. The hour passed slowly. Isabella finished her hot chocolate, read another chapter of her history book, and was just starting to doze off when the break room door opened again. This time it was Ms. Reynolds, the event coordinator. Isabella sat up straight, suddenly alert. There you are, Ms. Reynolds said with a small smile. I've been looking for you. Is something wrong? Isabella asked, her stomach tightening with worry. Ms. Reynolds shook her head. Not at all. In fact, quite the opposite. She took a seat across from Isabella. I wanted to thank you properly for your help earlier. The piano is in the perfect position and the lighting looks wonderful with it. Isabella felt a small glow of pride. Really? Really? Ms. Reynolds confirmed. And I have a question for you. Do you actually play the piano or do you just know how to move one? I play, Isabella said, sitting up a little straighter. I've been taking lessons for 3 years. Are you any good? The question was direct, but Ms. Reynolds's tone was kind. Isabella hesitated. Her teacher said she had talent, but she didn't want to brag. I practice a lot, she said finally. And I like playing. I'm learning Beethoven's Für Elise right now. Impressive, Ms. Reynolds said, raising an eyebrow. Listen, Isabella, the reason I'm asking is that we've run into a small problem with tonight's program. The governor's performance was supposed to be preceded by a young pianist from the City Youth Orchestra, sort of a student mentor moment that looks good in the press photos. But the student has come down with food poisoning and won't be able to perform. Isabella's eyes widened as she began to understand where this conversation was heading. Are you asking me to play instead? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Reynolds smiled. It would solve our problem quite neatly. You're already here, you play the piano, and frankly, after the scene in the lobby, Mr. Peterson seems to have taken a liking to you. He's the one who suggested I ask you. Isabella's heart began to race. Play at a fancy charity gala? In front of the governor and who knew how many rich, important people? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. I don't have anything nice to wear, she said, looking down at her jeans and t-shirt. We can take care of that, Ms. Reynolds said with a dismissive wave. The hotel has a boutique, and I'm sure we can find something suitable in your size. The important question is, can you play something appropriate for the occasion? Something short and impressive? Isabella thought for a moment. I know Mozart's Rondo alla Turca pretty well. My teacher says I play it with good energy. Perfect, Ms. Reynolds said, standing up. The gala starts at 7 and the piano performance segment is at 8:30. I'll need to clear this with your mother, of course. She's cleaning rooms on the 3rd floor. Isabella offered. I'll find her. Ms. Reynolds headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Isabella? You might want to practice a bit before tonight. I'll see about getting you access to a piano for an hour or so. After Ms. Reynolds left, Isabella sat in stunned silence. Had that really just happened? Was she really going to perform at a fancy charity gala? Her Isabella Cortez, whose mother cleaned hotel rooms for a living. She tried to remember the notes to Rondo alla Turca, her fingers automatically moving in patterns on an imaginary keyboard. She knew the piece well. Her teacher had even entered her in a small community competition with it last year, where she'd won 2nd place. But playing in a competition for other piano students and their parents was very different from playing at a hotel charity gala with the governor in attendance. 20 minutes later, the break room door burst open and her mother rushed in, still in her housekeeping uniform, her face a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Isabella, is it true? Ms. Reynolds just told me. They want me to play the piano at the gala tonight, Isabella confirmed, still not quite believing it herself. One of the performers got sick and they need a replacement. Elena sank onto the couch next to her daughter. Dios mío, she breathed. My daughter performing at the Pinecrest Charity Gala. Should I do it? Isabella asked, suddenly uncertain. What if I mess up? What if I embarrass you? Elena took her daughter's hands. Mija, you could never embarrass me. I am proud of you no matter what. She gently tucked a strand of hair behind Isabella's ear. But this is your decision. If you want to play, I will support you. If you don't, that's okay too. Isabella thought about it. She thought about the beautiful grand piano in the lobby. She thought about how it had felt to help move it, to be part of making something important happen. And she thought about Mr. Blackwell's dismissive attitude, how he had made her feel small and unwelcome. I want to do it, she said firmly. I want to play. Elena beamed at her. Then you will play, and you will be magnificent. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind. Ms. Reynolds arranged for Isabella to use a small, upright piano in one of the hotel's meeting rooms for practice. Elena was given permission to leave her shift early so she could help her daughter prepare. They visited the hotel boutique, where the manager, who had heard about the morning's drama, insisted on lending Isabella a beautiful dark blue dress with a modest lace collar at no charge. Consider it our apology for how you were treated. Earlier, the boutique manager said with a wink. By 7 o'clock, the hotel lobby had transformed. The lights were dimmed and candles flickered on elegantly set tables. Men in suits and women in evening gowns mingled. sipping champagne and nibbling on hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played softly in one corner. Isabella and her mother watched from a side hallway. Isabella now dressed in the blue dress, her hair neatly braided and pinned up in a style that made her look older than her 11 years. "Look at all those people," Isabella whispered, a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. "Don't think about them," Elena advised. "Just think about the music like your teacher always says." Ms. Reynolds appeared beside them, elegant in a black evening gown. "There you are. You look lovely, Isabella." She handed them each a program. "You're scheduled right before the governor. You'll play one piece, take a bow, and then introduce His Excellency. I've written a simple introduction for you to read." She handed Isabella a small card with a few sentences typed on it. Isabella nodded, trying to take it all in. She noticed Mr. Peterson across the lobby greeting guests. He caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod, and then she saw Mr. Blackwell. He was stationed near the entrance, checking invitations. He hadn't noticed her yet, but Isabella felt her stomach clench at the sight of him. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, noticing her daughter's sudden tension. "Mr. Blackwell is here," Isabella whispered. Elena followed her gaze. "Yes, of course he is. He works here just like me. What if he gets mad that I'm performing? What if he says something?" Elena squeezed her daughter's hand. "He won't. Mr. Peterson has approved your performance, and even Mr. Blackwell wouldn't question that." She knelt down to look Isabella in the eye. "Listen to me. You belong here tonight. You earned this opportunity with your talent and your knowledge. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Isabella took a deep breath and nodded. Her mother was right. She had earned this. The next hour passed quickly as Isabella watched the gala from her hiding spot. There were speeches about the charity, something to do with music education for underprivileged children, which seemed fitting given the circumstances. There was a lavish dinner, which Isabella and her mother were invited to eat in a small side room reserved for staff and performers. And then suddenly it was 8:20, and Ms. Reynolds was motioning for Isabella to come to the side of the makeshift stage where the piano waited. "5 minutes," Ms. Reynolds whispered. "Are you ready?" Isabella nodded, her mouth too dry for words. She looked out at the sea of well-dressed strangers, all engaged in conversation, unaware that the next performer was a housemaid's daughter who had never played for such an important audience. And then, as if drawn by her thoughts, she locked eyes with Mr. Blackwell. He was standing near the back of the room, a look of shock spreading across his face as he recognized her in her fancy dress. In that moment, something shifted inside Isabella. The nervousness didn't disappear, but it transformed into a different kind of energy, a determination to show everyone, especially Mr. Blackwell, exactly what she could do. Mr. Peterson stepped onto the stage to introduce the next portion of the program. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat for you tonight. Before Governor Hall takes the stage, we are delighted to present a young pianist whose talent we discovered quite by accident here at the Pinecrest just today. Please welcome Isabella Cortez." As the crowd applauded politely, Isabella stepped onto the stage, her head held high, ready to play the performance of her life. The polite applause continued as Isabella approached the grand piano. The spotlight felt warm on her face, and the blue dress suddenly seemed too tight around her chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. As she settled onto the piano bench, she caught her mother's eye from the side of the room. Elena gave her an encouraging smile and a subtle thumbs up. Isabella took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and let herself forget about everything else. The crowd, Mr. Blackwell, even the governor waiting for his turn to play. For a moment it was just her and the piano, just like in her lessons at the community center. Then she began to play. The first few notes of Mozart's Rondo alla Turca filled the ballroom. Isabella had played this piece hundreds of times before, but never on an instrument like this. The Steinway responded to her touch with a richness of sound that her practice piano could never produce. It was like switching from a bicycle to a sports car, the same basic principles, but so much more power and sensitivity. After the initial nervousness of the first few measures, Isabella fell into the familiar rhythm of the piece. Her fingers danced across the keys, bringing the lively Turkish march to life. She remembered her teacher's instructions. "Let the music breathe, Isabella. It's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about telling a story. The crowd had gone completely silent. Isabella couldn't see them with the spotlight in her eyes, but she could feel their attention focused on her. She pushed away any thoughts of judgment or criticism and lost herself in the music. As she played the final flourish and lifted her hands from the keys, there was a moment of silence, a moment that stretched just long enough for doubt to begin creeping in. Had she made a mistake? Was the audience just being polite because she was a child? Then the applause erupted. Not the polite, obligatory kind from her introduction, but enthusiastic, genuine appreciation. Someone even whistled. Isabella blinked in the spotlight, a smile spreading across her face as she stood and gave a small curtsy. Just as her piano teacher had taught her. She glanced to the side of the stage where Ms. Reynolds was beaming and making a subtle gesture for Isabella to introduce the governor. Isabella nodded, remembering the card in her pocket. She stepped up to the microphone, pulled out the small card, and read the introduction in a clear voice that only trembled slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce our next performer, a man who serves our state with the same passion and dedication with which he plays the piano. Please welcome Governor Hall. The applause grew even louder as the governor, a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair, walked onto the stage. He shook Isabella's hand with genuine warmth. "Wonderful playing, young lady," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're a tough act to follow." Isabella smiled shyly and whispered, "Thank you, sir," before walking off the stage, her heart soaring with pride. As she made her way back to where her mother was waiting, several guests stopped her to compliment her performance. An older woman in a sparkly gown told her she had remarkable talent. A man with a bow tie asked if she planned to study music in college. Isabella thanked them all politely, still in a daze from the experience. When she finally reached her mother, Elena pulled her into a tight hug. "Mi vida, you were amazing. Did you hear how they applauded for you?" Isabella nodded against her mother's shoulder, suddenly overwhelmed by emotion. "I didn't mess up," she said, her voice muffled. "Of course you didn't mess up. You played beautifully." Elena pulled back to look at her daughter's face, wiping away a tear that had escaped despite Isabella's best efforts to contain it. "Why are you crying?" "These should be happy tears. They are," Isabella assured her. I didn't think I could do it, and then I did, and everyone liked it, and you proved to yourself what I've always known," Elena said softly, "that you can do anything you set your mind to." Someone cleared their throat behind them. Isabella turned to see Mr. Peterson standing there, along with a woman in an expensive-looking red dress. "Excuse me, Ms. Cortez, Isabella," Mr. Peterson said with a smile. "I'd like to introduce you to Mrs. Winters, the chairperson of the charity we're supporting tonight." The woman in red held out her hand to Isabella. "That was quite a performance, young lady. I understand you've been taking lessons at a community center?" "Yes, ma'am," Isabella replied, shaking the woman's hand. "For 3 years now?" 3 years? Mrs. Winters looked impressed. "And where do you attend school?" "Lincoln Middle School," Elena answered, placing a protective hand on Isabella's shoulder. Mrs. Winters exchanged a glance with Mr. Peterson. "Are you aware that our charity provides scholarships
to the Anderson School of Music's weekend
program for talented young musicians who wouldn't otherwise have access to advanced training?" Isabella's eyes widened. The Anderson School was famous. Everyone in her piano class talked about it with reverence. Students from Anderson went on to Juilliard and other prestigious music schools, but the tuition was far beyond what her mother could afford. "Mrs. Winters is suggesting that you might be a good candidate for one of those scholarships," Mr. Peterson explained. Seeing Isabella's confusion, "Me?" Isabella squeaked. Mrs. Winters smiled. "Based on what I heard tonight, absolutely. We'll need to arrange a formal audition, of course, but I'd say your chances are excellent." Isabella looked up at her mother, who seemed as stunned as she felt. "Mom?" Elena found her voice. That's very generous, Mrs. Winters. We would be honored if Isabella could audition." "Wonderful," Mrs. Winters said, reaching into a small purse and pulling out a business card. "Have her piano teacher contact me directly to set it up. We have several openings for the spring semester." As Mrs. Winters walked away to rejoin the gala, Mr. Peterson smiled at the still shocked pair. "Quite a turn of events from this morning, isn't it?" he said. "Sometimes life has interesting ways of working out." As if on cue, there was a movement in the crowd nearby, and Mr. Blackwell appeared. His expression was difficult to read as he looked at Isabella in her blue dress. the governor's applause still echoing in the background. For a moment, no one spoke. Isabella felt her mother's hand tighten on her shoulder again, but Mr. Peterson seemed completely at ease. "Ah, Richard," he said pleasantly. "I was just congratulating our young performer on her excellent playing. Don't you think she did well?" Mr. Blackwell cleared his throat, his eyes darting between Isabella, Elena, and his boss. "Yes," he said finally. "Very accomplished." The word seemed to cost him considerable effort, but Isabella felt a small surge of satisfaction nonetheless. "In fact," Mr. Peterson continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension, "Mrs. Winters is considering Isabella for one of the Anderson School scholarships. Quite an opportunity." Mr. Blackwell's eyebrows rose slightly. Indeed, an awkward silence fell. Isabella could almost see the internal struggle playing out on Mr. Blackwell's face, the desire to maintain his dignity warring with the knowledge that he had misjudged the situation badly. Finally, he seemed to come to a decision. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Isabella. "I believe I owe you an apology, young lady," he said stiffly. "I reacted hastily this morning. It appears I was wrong about your intentions and your abilities." Isabella hadn't expected an apology, especially not in front of Mr. Peterson. She glanced up at her mother, unsure how to respond. Elena gave her a small nod of encouragement. "Thank you for saying that." "Mr. Blackwell," Isabella said carefully, "I understand why you were worried about the piano. It's a beautiful instrument." "Yes, well," Mr. Blackwell adjusted his tie. "Perhaps you could tell me more about how you learned to move pianos properly. It might be useful information for our staff training." It wasn't exactly a warm invitation to friendship, but Isabella recognized the olive branch for what it was. "I'd be happy to," she said with a small smile. Mr. Peterson clapped his hands together once. "Excellent. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to check on the governor. I believe he's wrapping up his performance." He gave Isabella a wink before disappearing into the crowd. Left alone with Isabella and Elena, Mr. Blackwell seemed at a loss for words. "Your daughter is quite talented, Miss Cortez," he said finally. "You must be very proud." "I am," Elena said simply. "Every day." Mr. Blackwell nodded, then glanced at his watch. "I should get back to my duties. Enjoy the rest of the evening." He walked away, his posture slightly less rigid than before. As he disappeared into the crowd, Isabella let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Do you think he meant it?" "The apology?" Elena considered this. "I think he meant it as much as a man like that can mean anything. People don't change completely overnight, mija. But maybe he'll think twice before judging someone by their appearance or background next time." Isabella nodded, thinking about how different Mr. Blackwell had seemed in this encounter compared to their morning confrontation. People were complicated, she realized, even the mean ones. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and introductions. Isabella met the governor, who told her he'd been playing piano for 30 years and still couldn't perform Mozart as well as she had. She was offered a plate of fancy desserts by a waiter, who whispered that the kitchen staff had watched her performance on the security monitors and were cheering for her. Even Ms. Reynolds, who struck Isabella as the type of person who was hard to impress, seemed genuinely delighted by how the night had turned out. By the time the gala wound down and they were ready to head home, Isabella was exhausted but happy. As they waited for their bus at the hotel entrance, she leaned against her mother's side. "Mom," she said through a yawn. "Yes, Misha? Do you think I could really get that scholarship?" Elena wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "After what I saw tonight?" "I have no doubt," Isabella smiled, her eyes drifting closed. She had gone from being yelled at in the hotel lobby to performing on stage in front of hundreds of people, all in the span of a single day. What other impossible things might be possible? With that thought warming her heart, she leaned against her mother as they boarded the bus that would take them home. The business card from Mrs. Winters tucked safely in her mother's purse, a small piece of paper that might just change their lives forever. 1 year later, the Saturday morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Anderson School of Music, casting golden rectangles on the polished wood floor of the practice room. Isabella sat at the piano, her fingers moving confidently through the complex passages of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Her brow furrowed slightly as she approached a particularly difficult section, but her hands never faltered. Watching from a chair in the corner, Elena felt a familiar swell of pride. In the year since the charity gala at the Pinecrest Hotel, Isabella's talent had blossomed under the guidance of her new teachers at Anderson. The scholarship from Mrs. Winter's foundation had covered not only the tuition, but also transportation costs and even a small stipend for sheet music and supplies. As Isabella finished the piece, Elena applauded softly. "Beautiful, mija. You make it sound so easy." Isabella smiled, stretching her fingers. "It's getting better. Ms. Chen says I need to work on the dynamics in the middle section." She glanced at the clock on the wall. "We should get going soon if we're going to make it on time." Elena nodded, gathering her purse. Today was a special day, one they had been looking forward to for weeks. They left the practice room and walked through the elegant hallways of the Anderson School. Several students and teachers greeted Isabella by name as they passed. In just a year, she had become a familiar face here, known for both her talent and her unusual story. Outside, the spring air was warm and fragrant with blooming flowers. They boarded a bus headed downtown, finding seats near the back. "Are you nervous?" Elena asked as the bus pulled away from the curb. Isabella considered the question. "A little," she admitted, "but mostly excited. I've been practicing so hard." "You'll be wonderful," Elena assured her, "just like always." The bus ride took 20 minutes, carrying them from the upscale neighborhood where the Anderson School was located to the heart of downtown. When they stepped off at their stop, the Pinecrest Hotel rose before them, its glass and stone facade gleaming in the morning light. Isabella paused for a moment, looking up at the building. "It feels different coming here as a guest," she said. Elena squeezed her daughter's shoulder. "Well, today you're not just any guest. You're the star of the show." They walked through the revolving doors into the lobby. It looked much as Isabella remembered from a year ago. The marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, the plush furniture arranged in elegant groupings. And there in the center stood the grand piano, the same Steinway that had changed her life. But there were differences too. Today, a small stage had been set up beside the piano. Chairs were arranged in rows facing it, and hotel staff were putting finishing touches on floral arrangements and a podium. "Isabella, Ms. Cortez, you're here." Ms. Reynolds hurried across the lobby to greet them, elegant as ever in a tailored pantsuit. Though she no longer worked with her officially, Isabella had seen the event coordinator several times over the past year at various functions connected to the scholarship program. "Right on time," Ms. Reynolds said with approval. "We'll start in about 30 minutes. The green room is set up for you through those doors." She gestured toward a side hallway. "Most of the special guests have already arrived, including Mrs. Winters and the board members from the foundation." "And the students?" Elena asked. "They're on their way. 2 buses full of them." Ms. Reynolds smiled. "They're very excited about today." Isabella took a deep breath, feeling butterflies in her stomach. Today wasn't just any performance. Today was the official launch of the Keys to the Future program, a new initiative sparked by her experience at the Pinecrest. The program would provide free piano lessons to students from her old school and other underserved communities. Using facilities and instruments donated by local businesses and taught by volunteer musicians, including students from the Anderson School, Isabella would be performing at the launch event. Of course, but more importantly, she would be sharing her story and officially becoming a student mentor in the program. At 12 years old, she would be the youngest mentor they had ever had. "Let's get you settled in the green room," Ms. Reynolds said, leading them down the hallway. "There's water and snacks, and you can practice on the keyboard in there if you want to warm up." The green room was small but comfortable, with plush couches and a digital piano in one corner. As Ms. Reynolds left them to finish coordinating the event, Isabella sat down at the keyboard and played a few scales to warm up her fingers. Elena watched her daughter, marveling at how poised she had become. Isabella had always been mature for her age, but the past year had given her a new confidence that went beyond her years. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," Elena called. The door opened to reveal Mr. Peterson, the hotel manager, looking distinguished in a dark suit. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Our guest of honor has arrived, I see." Isabella stood up, returning his smile. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson. Thank you for hosting the event today." "It's our pleasure," he assured her. "The Pinecrest is proud to be associated with the Keys to the Future program. He gestured to someone in the hallway behind him. There's someone else who wanted to say hello before the event. To Isabella's surprise, Mr. Blackwell stepped into the doorway. He looked much the same as she remembered, tall, thin, with that serious expression. But something about his demeanor had changed. He seemed less rigid somehow. "Hello, Isabella," he said, his voice lacking the sharp edge she remembered from their first encounter. "Ms. Cortez." He nodded respectfully to Elena. "Mr. Blackwell," Isabella said somewhat hesitantly. "I wanted to wish you luck today, though I doubt you'll need it." He cleared his throat. "I've heard you play several times now at the hotel's Sunday brunch series. You've improved significantly." Coming from Mr. Blackwell, this was high praise indeed. After the charity gala, Mr. Peterson had offered Isabella a monthly spot performing during the hotel's popular Sunday brunch, a paid position that had helped supplement Elena's income and given Isabella valuable performance experience. "Thank you," Isabella said sincerely. Mr. Blackwell nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I also wanted to give you this. A small token for today's occasion." Isabella accepted the package with surprise, looking to her mother for guidance. "Go ahead, open it," Elena encouraged. Equally surprised by the gesture, Isabella carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on velvet lining, was a beautiful silver pin in the shape of a piano. "It's tradition to wear a pin like this for significant performances," Mr. Blackwell explained. "My mother was a pianist. She wore this for her debut with the city orchestra many years ago." Isabella stared at the pin, then at Mr. Blackwell. Too stunned to speak. "That's very generous of you." "Mr. Blackwell," Elena said, filling the silence. He waved away her thanks. "It's been sitting in a drawer for years. My mother would have wanted it to go to someone with talent." He hesitated, then added, "Someone who truly loves music." Isabella finally found her voice. "I'll take good care of it," she promised. "And I'll wear it today." A small smile, perhaps the first Isabella had ever seen from him, briefly crossed Mr. Blackwell's face. "Good, well, I should let you prepare." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Isabella, remember to breathe between phrases in the Chopin. You rushed it slightly last Sunday." With that piece of unexpected advice, he left, followed by Mr. Peterson, who gave Isabella a wink before closing the door behind them. "Well," Elena said after a moment, "people really can change." Isabella carefully pinned the silver piano to the lapel of her blazer, admiring how it caught the light. "I think maybe people just show different sides of themselves at different times," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe Mr. Blackwell was always a bit nice deep down." "Very deep down," Elena said with a small laugh. Before Isabella could respond, there was another knock at the door and Ms. Reynolds poked her head in. "5 minutes, Isabella. The students have arrived and we're ready to begin." The butterflies returned to Isabella's stomach, but now they felt more like excitement than nervousness. She straightened her blazer, checked that the pin was secure, and took a deep breath. "Ready?" Elena asked, holding out her hand. Isabella nodded, taking her mother's hand. Together they followed Ms. Reynolds out to the lobby, which had filled with people while they were in the green room. There were adults in business attire, board members and donors, Isabella assumed. But more importantly, there were dozens of children her age and younger, sitting in the front rows, their faces bright with curiosity and excitement. Mrs. Winters stood at the podium, welcoming everyone to the event. When she spotted Isabella, she smiled and gestured for her to approach the stage. "And now," Mrs. Winters said into the microphone, "it is my great pleasure to introduce the young musician who inspired this entire program." Just 1 year ago, Isabella Cortez was an ordinary middle school student with an extraordinary talent. A talent that might never have been discovered if not for a chance encounter right here in this hotel lobby. Today, she is one of the Anderson School's most promising students, and she is here to share her gift with us and to help launch a program that will open doors for many other young musicians. Please welcome Isabella Cortez. The applause was warm and enthusiastic as Isabella walked to the stage. As she passed the front rows, she saw the children watching her with wide eyes. Children from neighborhoods like hers, who might never have considered that they, too, could one day play on a stage or attend a prestigious music school. Isabella took her place at the piano, adjusting the bench slightly. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys as she took a moment to center herself. She thought of her journey over the past year, from the morning when Mr. Blackwell had yelled at her for touching this very piano, to today when she was about to play it again, not as an interloper but as an honored guest. She thought of her mother, who had worked so hard to give her opportunities. She thought of her teachers at the community center, who had nurtured her early interest in music, and her new teachers at Anderson, who were helping her develop her gift. She thought of Mrs. Winters and the foundation that had given her a scholarship, and even of Mr. Blackwell, whose pin she now wore proudly. And then she thought of the children in the audience, children who might see themselves in her story, who might realize that they too had gifts waiting to be discovered. With that thought warming her heart, Isabella began to play, her music filling the hotel lobby just as it had 1 year ago. But this time no one was surprised by the beauty of what they heard. This time, everyone was simply there to listen, to appreciate and to celebrate the beginning of something new, something that had started with a chance encounter, a misunderstanding and a moment when everyone had frozen and stared. Sometimes, Isabella realized as her fingers danced across the keys, the worst moments in our lives can lead to the best ones, if we have the courage to keep playing our song.